Hello, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Signed, sealed, remembered. Was Priscilla there? And today, we're back in Hollywood, California, on Rocco Place, where Elvis is leasing the property. It's a new lease. And in his new bathroom, he's tripped and fallen, hit his head on the tile floor, or maybe the bathtub. But he's got a big knot on his head the size of a golf ball. And in the last several episodes, we've detailed out what the guys who were there did and what they said and what they saw. And then a couple of days later, the colonel had a meeting and he started laying down the law. Hi, Keith. Hi, Linda. Hi, Gunn. Hi, Jen. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate seeing you guys here. One of the things that we heard was that Billy Smith, Elvis's cousin, said that Elvis asked Billy to stay with him in his bedroom while he recovered from this head injury. Elvis had a concussion. Hi, Marion. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. So Billy Smith said that he spent 10 days nursing Elvis back to health in this bedroom in California. And many people have asked, where's Priscilla? What's Priscilla doing? She is his fiancée. Wouldn't she be extremely interested in the health of Elvis after he's had this injury? We've heard Sonny West say that Priscilla was there, but we haven't really heard anybody else say it. And so we're going to look today at what Priscilla has to say about what happened. But before we get there, we're going to start with a song about the place that Elvis wants to be, and that's on the Circle G. And this song is about the cross that's there, and that Elvis saw, and that spoke to his heart, and he knew he had to buy that property. And this is the cross on the circle.
He saw the cross at dawn and said, "It's a good omen, and a dream again." At the break of dawn, through the window pane, he saw a cross in morning rain, white as grace, tall as prayer, calling him to build and share. Not a kingdom, not a throne, but a place of love alone, where laughter rides on horse's breath and peace outshines the fear of death. Come home to the circle and the sign, where the lake reflects the holy line. No one needs money, no one needs fame, just a handshake and a name. Come home where the cross stands tall. Come and share the love of all. Mobile homes and barbecue nights, trucks and trowels and porch light rides. He handpicked hard to share the dream, a mythic village by the stream. This is more than land and grace, refuge carved in sacred space, a gift of love to friends and kin, protected from the world's loud din. Come home to the circle and the side, where the lake reflects the holy line. No one needs money, no one needs fame, just a handshake and a name. Come home, where the cross stands strong. Come and share the love of all. Oh, come and share the love of all.
Thank you all for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today we are listening for the echo of Priscilla Presley at Clambake. And Joe Esposito said Elvis had been so angry for 2 days after getting the script. Now we know that when Elvis got this script, the Colonel and several Hollywood studio executives showed up at Elvis's house and they had a private meeting. And we don't know what happened in the private meeting. Elvis may have told some of the guys, and some of the guys have reported what they believe happened at the meeting, but we don't really know. And the most important thing to me is that Elvis did not travel from his house. Others came to him. I do not believe that the person who did not have control in the situation would be the person that everyone else traveled to. At the moment Elvis was angry, he had not been hurt yet, so there was no need for him to stay at the house. But when he put forth his anger, when he let it be known, they all gathered to soothe him. There is no money in this operation of Clambake without Elvis Presley. And I do not believe that if anyone had told Elvis that it was going to be their way, or Elvis would be ruined in the future, or any other threats, that Elvis would have continued to stay there. He did not want to be there. So I feel like he would have immediately headed straight back out and gone back to the Circle G. But he might have felt so much pressure that maybe he did acquiesce to whatever it is that he was told he had to do with this script. We don't know. We just know that eventually the Colonel and the executives left, which was a signal that everything was now okay and was going to proceed forward. But Joe says that Elvis was so angry for 2 days after getting the script that he had slipped, banging his head against the bathtub so he wouldn't have to show up on set. So Joe sees in Elvis's accident what's most likely an accident. He sees an act of rebellion, and he links that to Elvis's anger. So emotionally, that all does make sense. But most likely, it was really an accident. And it appears that there were some cords and some other tripping issues that would happen within this bathroom. Plus, it was a new place. Plus, it might have been dark. So, it seems less likely that it was an act of rebellion. But Joe's emotional memory of this time period still very important. He's telling us Elvis was angry. And Linda is asking, wasn't Elvis under contract? Elvis was under contract. And that's what kept him there, if anything did, his professionalism to do what he'd said he would do. He'd signed it. He was going to have to go through with it. But like a soldier in the army, that doesn't mean you don't get to grumble. So he grumbled. Don't know what actually happened there. I don't think he was gonna leave, but if someone had outright threatened him in any way, I think he might have just said, forget the contract. Colonel will figure it out. That's just me. That's who I think Elvis was. If you've been following along in the karate series I've been doing in the mornings, my mornings, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, then you know that when Elvis earned his black belt, he did it for real. So he was a tough individual. He had willpower. He could take a punch, both physically and metaphorically. So I think he would have taken that punch. That he wasn't going to fold under to anybody. But I don't know for sure. Just my opinion. So feel free to put yours in the comments, in the chat. Let me know how you feel about it. Make sure you like, you subscribe, you do all those wonderful YouTube things. And most importantly, tell everybody you know that loves Elvis to join us here at Hillbilly Cat History. And Gunn says that she cannot believe that Elvis would hurt himself as an act of rebellion. I don't believe that either. I think it's more likely an accident. I think we've all had accidents in the bathroom and a lot of close calls that we think, wow, that could have been a lot worse. I know I have. And Linda's saying that she thought he was committed. I think he was legal, contractually committed. But like if you look today, contracts don't seem to mean that much to a lot of people. And he would have faced consequences. They could have got him for some money for sure. But I don't think it would have been the end of his career by any means. I think the Colonel, and even if he didn't have the Colonel, I think Elvis's talent and ability, proven ability to bring money when he was a willing part of the project, would have convinced plenty of people to come forward with the money, because he was doubling people's millions of dollars in less than 6 months. So there was a lot of money to be had here with Elvis. He had a lot of power if he wanted to wield it. It wasn't in the contract itself. It's Elvis being Elvis. He's not just the product. Colonel's selling him as a product, but he's the linchpin. There is no product without him. You can't make an Elvis movie without Elvis. They tried. A lot of near Elvis movies, but they weren't making the kind of money that Elvis was. So Lamar Fike says, when he had pills in him, Elvis would get dizzy, and he got up in the middle of the night to use the toilet, and he slipped or fell over the TV cord, and he hit his head on the bathtub, and boy, all heck broke loose. Now that's all Lamar said about this incident. So what do you guys think? Was Lamar there? Was he not there? Nobody else has mentioned Lamar. You guys think he was there? And Linda's saying, right, that she meant contractually obligated, and no, she didn't think Elvis fell in the bathroom on purpose, although she has heard it speculated. And Linda Curtis is saying maybe if he didn't fulfill the contract, he wouldn't have been able to do anything else. I think there were definitely going to be consequences, but I think that people wanted to make enough money. They would have found a way around all the contractual issues. But that's just me. I mean, there definitely would have been an issue for a while. Elvis's pay would have fallen for a while. People that he wanted to pay might have had to been let go. I'm sure all of this weighed on his shoulders. And Gunn says that she has an impression Elvis always kept his promises. I totally agree with that. Like a contract. And he just did what he promised and was supposed to do, specifically when it affected other people. I totally agree with that, Gunn. But I think he was angry. I also think he was very angry about this situation. Maybe more angry than he'd been about any professional situation in his whole career. And Marion says, didn't Elvis say in a long interview that he couldn't do anything about the movie roles? Sounds as if he had tried. In a public interview, he said things like that. Yes, I definitely agree with that. But at the same time, I don't think in public interviews, even the long ones, that he was trying to share all of his internal struggles with us. But maybe this was what he's talking about. He tried, and after that he slipped and fell, and things went sour, and maybe he decided that things would be best if I don't do this. You know, if I just move ahead with what I've contracted until the contracts are over. And the Colonel did find a way to provide him an out by moving him over at least for one television special. And that's what Elvis sees that opportunity. And then turned it into a way out and into a whole new section of his career. So I do think that he was tired of the movies and that he had tried different ways to get these scripts to be better. And Keith says he thinks that Lamar was at the ranch, but not in Hollywood when Elvis fell. And Lorna agrees with Gunn about what she was saying. And Gunn saying, I heard him say that he took all the movies very seriously and always did his best. I absolutely believe that's true too. And even if he was extremely angry and he left in a fit of rage and got onto the plane and headed back, I'm sure he'd been thinking about the people that weren't going to get paid. He might have turned around and come back. Like, I don't know. They worked something out. So to me, that tells me that they soothed Elvis, not that they boxed him in. I don't think that he would have, I don't think they would have left if they boxed him in. Like, he would have fought against it so hard because he wasn't injured at this point. He was just angry. But I don't know. It's a good discussion, good way to think. This has been an excellent discussion within the chat. Let's put it that way. And Jen agrees Elvis was a professional even when the scripts were bad. I think this was just a way that he was trying to get those scripts to be better. And maybe he thought he'd won and they were going to be better in the next one. Or maybe he did give up while he was talking to these guys. And Larry Geller says, it was the first day of either shooting or pre-production for Clambake, and because it was our first day working at a new studio, I drove to Elvis's house. So Larry doesn't stay there. He lives elsewhere. I sat down in the living room with a couple of the guys waiting for Elvis to come out. 10, 15, 20 minutes passed and still no Elvis, which was unusual, since generally by the time anyone arrived, he was at least up and having breakfast. So Elvis has not come out of the bedroom at the normal time. We've heard this before, but I'm just refamiliarizing us with what they're saying so that we can compare it to the new things that we're about to hear. But Sonny West says, Priscilla found Elvis unconscious. She called Joe, who summoned Dr. M.E. Gorson, who in turn called in a favor from radiologist George Ellardine. Ellardine came over with a portable x-ray machine, but except for a golf ball-sized lump on Elvis's head, he was fine. So Sonny places Priscilla there, says she is the one who found Elvis, says she called Joe Esposito, so Priscilla herself, according to Sonny, did not call a doctor. She called Joe Esposito. And Sonny believes Joe Esposito called the doctor. And he does have it right that that doctor called the next doctor, the radiologist. So at least two of the things that Sonny says is true. The doctor called the other doctor, that's one. And that Joe made the first calls, although he called the colonel. But Joe was there, so he's got that part right. So now the question is Priscilla there? Does he have that part right? What do you guys think? Is Priscilla there? Has Sonny placed her there? Is Sonny himself there? Do you believe that Sonny was in Hollywood at Rocco Place when Elvis had the fall and they're discovering that he's got this golf ball sized lump? Was Sonny there? You guys let me know what you think. And Keith's saying, wow, Sonny tells the story that Scylla found EP. Right. He's the only one that said so. We've heard what the others said. We're going to hear it again. I'm going to reread it for us to get us back in there. But they basically agree, Billy and Larry, that Elvis walked out of the bedroom and said, my head hurts. Well, one says he said he needed a doctor. The other said that maybe he'd been hit. But Sonny says he's unconscious and that Priscilla has found him unconscious. That's much more serious than walking out and saying, ow, my head hurts. In fact, what Billy Smith says is, we were at Rocca Place at the time. We were in the den when Elvis came out and said to us, I fell and hit my head. I think I need to see a doctor. He had a pretty good bump on the back of his head. So they examined Elvis. They found the bump. Elvis says, I need to see a doctor. Nobody calls a doctor. Now, here's what Priscilla says. And Linda Curtis is asking, has anyone other than Sonny said Priscilla was there? No. I haven't mentioned her at all. She's not in the other stories. So what Priscilla says is the morning Elvis was to begin shooting, he awoke groggy, and he went into the bathroom while I was still in bed. So Priscilla says this isn't really the middle of the night. She's saying that they were asleep together in bed. Morning comes, he gets up, but he's groggy because it's morning and he just got up, and he goes into the bathroom, and Priscilla hasn't even gotten out of bed yet. She's probably groggy herself. And Gunn says Priscilla couldn't have been there because Billy would not have been needed to nurse Elvis for 10 days. And Marion says it sounds to me as if Sonny wasn't really there. Now let's remember also that Billy has said 10 days, but we've pretty much narrowed that down to 3 days, really 2 days with a little more, because they have the meeting 2 days after Elvis has this injury, not 2 weeks, or 10 days later, as Larry has said. So to Billy and Larry, this period of time feels extremely long, but it's not. It's only a few days, according to, actual dates. In fact, let's pull up, before I forget. If I get to talking, I forget I have all these great visual aids for you guys. But we know one of the things that's bothering Elvis is this contract from January 2nd that changed the commission for some things that the Colonel is involved in, some of the revenue streams. Colonel will now make 50% instead of 25%. So we've been over this, but the guys are connecting this to this event. But this happened 2 months before. So we should remember that whatever the Elvis is ticked off at the Colonel about right now, because they all agree Elvis is angry at the Colonel. Whatever it is, although there might be residual anger from this contract, it's about something else, because this is not the contract of the moment. This has been decided the previous year, and it took effect January 2nd. So he might still be steamed about it, but he's probably angry about something more in the moment. And Linda's saying, geez, all these stories. That's right. It's hard to make sense of them all. And Gunn says it's a little bit hard to believe Priscilla. She's changed often her history. Yep. But we still got to take into account what she says. And then we may be able to see the truth or where the truth is not at. And Linda Jewell saying it seemed like there was a lot of infighting. Those in Elvis's inner circle don't seem to get along, including Priscilla. I believe that's true. I believe there are also cliques within the inner circle, and not so much at the time of the events, but later, so that certain series of books, circles of books, they all agree with each other to a certain extent because they've kind of all hashed it out together. But like Larry is in a silo of his own. Nobody's asking Larry what he thought about the events, and Larry's not asking anybody else before he writes up his portions of the story. So you can see that over the last 50 years as these books and memories and interviews and specials and TV stuff and documentaries, as they've all come out, you can see the circles of harmony and disharmony rippling through all of it. And Pat's saying that, welcome Pat, thank you so much for coming, that Priscilla forgets what the lies she's already told. I think they all do that, Pat. Now, when you continue to publish books, and you've got more than one volume, well, then it gets a lot tougher to keep it all lined up. And I think that she's one of them that's fallen to that trap, and she's not the only one. She's definitely the most spectacular, though, I would say. And Priscilla says, the morning he was to begin shooting, he awoke groggy and went into the bathroom while I was still in bed. I heard a loud thump, then cursing. Gosh darn words we can't say here on YouTube, cord. Who the heck put this thing here? I jumped out of bed and ran into the bathroom, calling out, what's happened? Elvis was lying on the floor, rubbing his head. I tripped over the gosh darn TV cord. It was so darn dark in here, I didn't see it. Help me out of here. I have to lie down. So this is what Priscilla says has happened. She did find Elvis in the sense that he fell in the bathroom. He didn't go unconscious, apparently. He yelled out. So she ran to his yelling. He's cursing up a storm. He says that somebody has plugged in the TV. And he's tripped over that television cord. Apparently he didn't turn the light on in the bathroom because it's dark, according to what Priscilla says, Elvis said, that he's saying it's so dark in here, I didn't see the TV cord. And now his head hurts and he needs to lie down. So he did not walk out of the bedroom, according to Priscilla, but he also wasn't unconscious. So Sonny's story is not exactly correct. But the others who didn't mention Priscilla being there, I mean, she says she's right there and she's the one that found Elvis. So now I guess we have a mystery. I don't know. Who's telling the truth? Now, it's possible after he laid down, he got back up and walked out and complained to the guys. She is saying this is early in the morning, and they're saying he came out much later. But that would indicate he's been lying here with this head injury for a while, and Priscilla knows about it. She hasn't done anything. She hasn't called anybody. Now, maybe she thought since he's up and walking around, even though he says his head hurts, it's fine. I don't need to call a doctor. I think today we'd be more leery about the head injuries. We've heard more stories about what happens with head injuries. But back then, maybe she just didn't think it was important. Maybe she didn't think it was serious. And Priscilla says that although he was dizzy and off balance, we managed to make it back to the bed. So, this has had an effect on him. But it's not such an effect that he's not able to stand or walk. It's off balance. But he makes it to the bed. So again, maybe she thinks he's going to be fine after he lies down. No need to get anyone involved. Linda says that I just don't understand how he hit the back of his head if he tripped. So I think it depends on the size of the bathroom, what all is in it. And if he was just walking forward and he tripped over the cord, maybe he did fall straight, flat, and then he wouldn't have hit the back of his head. But maybe he twisted in an attempt to catch himself, and then he might have struck the back of his head on the ground. Or maybe he was close enough to... Now, there's a sunken tub, but maybe there's a regular tub as well. And maybe he fell and twisted to the side and then struck the back of his head on the side of that tub. I could think of different ways you might strike the back of your head. And of course, we don't know exactly where the bump is. It's being described as at the back of his head. But of course, we don't have any pictures or anything to show us. And Gunn's asking, where was she for the 10 days when Elvis needed her? She knew he was hurt. And Linda Jewell is saying that if you write a book or two, you might want to read it before you give an interview or record a video. You might. You might. You think you'd at least remember the first. And Linda's asking, Linda Jewell, what was mourning for Elvis at this time of his life? That she's ready to wake up at 2 p.m. Good question. This is Hollywood time. He's making a movie, so it's a regular workday schedule, starting very early. He's probably up this point in time where he got up that Priscilla's talking about. If it's his regular getting up time, it's probably like 6 a.m. Maybe 7. And then he's getting himself ready, and they're going to probably be at the studio by 8 a.m., maybe 9. It's possible he doesn't come in till the first call that they need him for, but he's got to be there early enough that they're going to get the makeup and the wardrobe and all of that. And because he's in every scene, basically, he's there from typically 7 or 8 in the morning till 6 or 7 at night. Maybe a little less on either side, depending on what's going on that day. And then it wouldn't be unusual for him, if he's got soundtrack stuff to do, to record that during the evening or even into the night. And that's one of the reasons he had to take the pills, is that they would get home and relax and party, and suddenly it's 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. They got to be back up at 7. So they would use the pills to pop themselves back awake. So at this point in the morning, because that's when you typically do the amphetamines, get yourself going for the morning, for the day, I think there's a good possibility that whoever's there with him, especially the ones that are deeply into the amphetamines, they've popped them all at this point before Elvis comes out for breakfast. And Larry Geller says that finally Elvis emerged from his room, and walking slowly, as if dazed, he wobbled a bit as he made his way across the room, and then he collapsed into a nearby chair with a sigh. And shaking his head in disbelief, he said, "Oh man, I got hit. I really got hit last night, man. I hit my head. You won't believe it. Come over here and feel this." One by one, we each gingerly touched the golf ball-sized lump on the back of his head. Hi, Regina. Thank you so much for coming. Hi, Lorna. Thank you for being here. Appreciate seeing you guys. So Larry gives the most detailed description of what Elvis says. Perhaps he's embellished this because the other guys don't remember Elvis giving this much speech. But it sounds like Priscilla found him. He laid back down for a while, because that would have been early, and now after the time that they would normally expect him for breakfast, so let's say hour and a half, because he's about 20 minutes late for breakfast, so maybe he's been laying there an hour and a half, and now he's gotten up and he comes out, and he's basically telling them he's not going to be able to go to the studio. He thinks he probably needs to see a doctor. At least that's what Billy said. Now, Larry doesn't say he said he needed to see a doctor. Did Priscilla come out with him? We don't know. None of them mention him. Now, what Priscilla says is that after she got him into the bed, so this would have been a little earlier, before he would have walked out and the guys found him. Hi, Luann. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you getting up early to be with us. So what Priscilla says is, feeling a big lump on his head, I called Joe Esposito at once, who summoned Colonel Parker and a doctor. And within minutes, the room was full of people, the doctor, his nurse, Colonel Parker, and several nervous studio executives. And Luann said she made it just in time for my live chat. You're right, Luann. You're here for the good part. So Priscilla says she called immediately for help. But she didn't call a doctor. Elvis has a big bump on the back of his head, has a medical injury. Priscilla takes action. She calls Joe Esposito. Now, Joe Esposito also wasn't staying at this house, but he would arrive around probably the same time or before Larry. So he's out there waiting in the den. He comes in at once, sees what's going on. He immediately takes action as well, sees that Elvis has a medical issue, and he does what anybody would do if somebody had a medical issue. He calls Colonel Parker. So now we've had two people that have looked at Elvis and said, yes, this man needs medical attention. And they both called other people who are not medical providers. Now Colonel Parker comes. And he calls a doctor, and within minutes of Colonel Parker's arrival, it's not the way Priscilla says it, but Joe Esposito who summoned Colonel Parker and a doctor, and within minutes, the room was full of people. So what's happened is Colonel Parker's come in. Colonel Parker has taken charge. Now the room is full of people. And it's a doctor, a nurse. So we don't just have a doctor here. He also has a nurse. And the other doctor may have a nurse as well. We know the other doctor has an x-ray machine. So they're bringing in everything they need to handle this situation medically. And the studio executives, who maybe were laying down the law to Elvis himself a couple of days before, they're here and they're very nervous because things are suddenly taking a bad turn for them. They can't, argue Elvis out of not being hurt. And he says he wish he was there. And Gunn says Elvis himself said he needed a doctor. According to Billy, he did. And they instead called Joe and Parker. It's strange. Yes, even Priscilla did not call a doctor. Although Sonny gave Joe credit for calling the doctor, he didn't do that, but he got the doctors right. It was Gorson and Ellerding. And Ellerding brings the x-ray machine. Sonny says Priscilla called Joe Esposito, who summoned Dr. Emmy Gorson, who in turn called in a favor from radiologist George Ellerding. Ellerding came over with a portable x-ray machine, but except for a golf ball-sized lump on Elvis's head, he was fine. Now, he wasn't fine because he had to spend some days in bed. Billy says 10. I don't think it's 10. I don't think 10 is possible to fit into the timeline. But Billy says it's 10. And we can see the timeline on the board actually up on the screen. And you can see the week of the 5th through the 11th. This happened on the night of the 8th, moving into the 9th. So the morning of Thursday the 9th, that's when all this is happening. And then on the 11th, that's when Colonel Parker's going to have a meeting. And we've talked a little bit about that meeting, and the first thing he told them, that everybody was going to get a pay cut. He's laying down the law. And here's Billy Smith's testimony from inside Elvis's room. Said that he was here during this critical period when these contract negotiations, which he links back to the 50% contract, were underway. Billy believes Colonel came in and forced Elvis to sign a contract that changed everything to 50% for the Colonel during this period. But he's also told us he didn't learn that until after Elvis died. So what's happened is Billy's learned about a contract, and he knows what the public knows about it, which is not a full view. And he's connected it back to this period because he knows it took effect in 1967. But it actually took effect 2 months before. So it has absolutely nothing to do with what's going on here. Now, maybe there's another contract, but it's not the one Billy thinks it is. But Billy testifies that Elvis is visibly distressed, but that he showed no outward emotion about the contract. Well, that's weird, right? To be visibly distressed and not visibly emotion. So Billy's, it's a little bit conflicting. But Billy says Elvis asked me to stay in his room with him and sleep on the cot. He wanted somebody to watch him, and I was a fairly light sleeper. I stayed for about 10 days, got his food for him, and never left the room. So in the same sentence, Billy says he got his food for him, but he never left the room. So he left the room to go get the food, right? So Billy is a little bit prone to exaggeration. But you have to wonder, where is Priscilla sleeping if Billy's sleeping in here with him? Is she okay with that? Well, what Priscilla says is the start of Elvis's film would be delayed indefinitely. She actually makes no statement about what's going on in this room during these days. So I don't know whether she's in there with Billy, and Billy didn't mention if she was in there. Is either one of them telling the entire truth here? Are we getting the whole story? Are there mismemories being stated? I don't know, but these accounts don't really line up to me. And some of them don't make a lot of linear sense. They don't match the timeline correctly. And Gunn saying that no one felt the responsibility to do what any of the other ordinary people would do, call a doctor. And Luann saying that Elvis could have built up fluid near the brain. And that Elvis was very lucky. Yeah, he was. Especially since it took a while to get the colonel there before they got any doctors involved. And it's a good thing that one doctor had a portable x-ray machine, and he was an expert at reading x-rays. And Gunn saying that Billy staying in the room 10 days with Elvis and Priscilla, that she doesn't think so. And Marion agrees she cannot believe that Elvis, Priscilla, and Billy were in one room for that period of time. Perhaps even a shorter period of time. And Keith says that Billy is pretty honest. So what we've got to remember is these people are remembering things from many decades in their past. Even at the earliest moments that they were telling these stories, the stories were already a decade or more old. And they're all being filtered through their personal perceptions and how they were affected by the events. And so Larry Geller, when he looks at these events, he sees a spiritual crisis. And he witnessed Elvis's alarming condition during the meeting on the 11th. And he says, the minute I saw him, I knew that this wasn't Elvis. He looked very strange, as if he was under the influence of something. His eyes were glazed and he was haunted looking. And we've talked in previous episodes that if Elvis was introduced to a heavier narcotic and barbiturate or sleeping agent during this period because of this injury, that may have led to future use of those products because they were working for him. As could be seen by the condition that he's in his bed 2 days after he's been hurt. Larry remembers this as 10 days or 14 days later. So that would be much more alarming. But this is a couple of days after Elvis has had this concussion. And I've also received comments that a person with a concussion will look like this, that their eyes will be sunk in the back of their head, that they will have trouble focusing and paying attention, that they're not able to intake information the way that we're normally able to intake information. Things are confused, and that it's not a good time for them to make any decisions, and that you don't need any drugs on top of that to look exactly as Larry described Elvis to look. Larry sees it as sinister, that somebody's exercising control over Elvis. But I think that ignores the golf ball-sized lump on the back of Elvis's head. You don't need to have control over a person who's got a head injury. They're going to give it all to you. Their head is not working correctly. And Elvis has been ordered to stay in bed for 2 weeks So there is significant healing going on in those first few days. And he probably is showing significant signs of a concussion during those days. And if he's got a golf ball sized lump on his head, I think there's a really good possibility they have given him some kind of strong narcotic, because I'm thinking that would hurt a lot. And Linda Curtis says that I am very diplomatic and that she means that in a kind way. I think it's easy to get trapped into a dislike for a person or for a person's actions. And then it becomes a lens to see the person through. And that people are not two-dimensional characters in a story. All the stories we've heard, everybody's a two-dimensional character, including Elvis. And so what we're doing is taking all those stories and we're putting them together to create the three-dimensional people. Not just Elvis, but everybody around him. Because Elvis didn't see any of these people as two-dimensional. And I think of this as like, if you've ever seen Puff the Magic Dragon, the cartoon, Jackie is the main character, little Jackie, and there's another character who is his reflection called Little Jackie Paper. And it's a flat two-dimensional Jackie drawn on paper and cut out, and he moves around. Well, Jackie Paper will never be the real Jackie because he's only a piece of paper. And the myths have flattened every single person in the Elvis Presley story into a piece of paper. And we're turning them all back into people. And that means they're complex. And if you dislike a person, and you're allowed to dislike a person, but if you view them through the lens of dislike, you may miss the parts that Elvis really liked about him. And that part may be worth knowing. Each of these people was extraordinary. Like Larry himself. He revolutionized hair care. And that sounds kind of maybe not that big a deal, but in the 1960s, it was a revolution. Men did not get their hair styled, and yet Larry started styling men's hair. Red West. He had a career as an actor. Now, he made those connections through Elvis, but he made his career as an actor through his own skills. And he wrote some songs, and he did some other stuff. He was, for a guy that grew up just like Elvis in the middle of Memphis, coming out of Hume's High School, he did some extraordinary things. Sonny West, fairly extraordinary individual for a guy who came out of the slums of Memphis. Marty Lacker did some amazing things in the musical industry. I mean, just some amazing things, but he wasn't a success as a business person. So when Elvis chose these people to be near him, he chose extraordinary people. Some of them failed. And Gunn says that Billy seems to have difficulty with his memory sometimes. Maybe he wasn't even there in the room. I think he does have trouble with his memory sometimes. And I think people expect Billy to have answers for everything. And I think over the years, that's been very tough on Billy and Joe. But I think that they have sometimes pushed out answers when they should have remained silent. You know, they've stoked some of the fires that they've complained about. And we have Keith saying that we have to remember that Larry, the EP visited his little religious community in Cali many times. So it wasn't Larry's religious community. I know exactly what you're talking about. Very important period of Elvis's life. And I think that you can trace a path that Elvis walked. You know, when he first got with Larry, he was desperate to see Jesus. He was desperate to have a vision of Jesus. And he ended up having a vision. And it was of Jesus, but I think Joe Stalin was in it too. And it was in the clouds. And I think this was like 1964, I'm wanting to say. And that really fired off the spiritual journey. And he begins to read all these books. And Larry thinks he's reading the books to find answers that are not within his Christian background. I don't believe that's what Elvis was doing, but I think he was following this path. He felt like he was being called to do more. And then he met with the religious leader that Keith is referencing. And that religious leader, Elvis told that person that he thought maybe he should stop performing and start, come to this spiritual center and start talking to people about spiritual stuff. And a man that Elvis had acted with had done just that. Plus, there was one of his female co-stars had become a nun. Mother Dolores Hart later became a nun after she worked with Elvis. So, and also one of his early friends, Jimmy Rogers Snow, I think it's Junior, right? The younger one. He was actually performing with Elvis in the 50s, and then he stopped and became a pastor. So Elvis saw these people that were doing these, what he kind of thought might be more important things. And so he started looking for a path to that. But this spiritual leader told him that wasn't his path, that his path was performing. That was clearly what he needed to do, and whatever message he needed to get out needed to go with the performing. Now, at the time, Elvis was still in the movies. So then he starts to go through this period of how does he get this message out if he's doing the movies? And he cuts the record, the album, How Great Thou Art. That album comes out right around now, right around the period we're talking about. And it's going to play a big role in some upcoming episodes. And I think that when Elvis completed that project, he looked around, he said, that was an important project. I was very happy doing it. I'm back to these movies again. This is not the spiritual fulfillment I'm looking for. And then while he's wrestling with these thoughts, he finds the horses. And then he finds happiness in the horses and thinks maybe this is the path. And he begins to go down this horse path. Then he sees the cross, which tells him this is the path. You're doing the right thing. So he buys the Circle G and he gets going on it. And what he does is he resets himself on the Circle G. And he gets to a point where he no longer needs it. And that's when he lets it go towards the end of the year. And in the next year, he moves to the television special, but he's ready to seize the opportunity. And then he moves into live performances. And in the live performances, he incorporates gospel music and his own words about God and Jesus. And he does this in every performance for the next almost a decade. So I think he was following a path that Larry had helped him onto, but it wasn't the path that Larry thought it was. But we've reached the end of our hour, and so we're going to have to find out what else Priscilla has to say and the rest of the law that the Colonel laid down in a future episode. But for now, I'm going to leave you with a brand new song. And this is a song that if you've been following the karate episodes that I've been doing in the mornings, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we've been learning about Elvis and karate and his karate masters. We've learned that he was not given a black belt. Elvis earned a black belt as a warrior. And this song is about earning the black belt from Hank Slamansky, who was one tough individual, and it's called Crucible of a Warrior.
Feel a flame, hammer in hand, carved out his name. 16 in airborne boots in the dirt, jumping through walls, unbaptized and hurt. Karate in Japan, fists like steel, champion of honor, deadly and real. Sensei, a warrior's no room for doubt. You wear the G or you train and come back. Your eyes a crucible, baby, not a showbiz belt. You bleed, you break, you feel a warrior's spell. Elvis hit the map, but he rolls with a roll. Sneer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior, forging Hank's domain. 30 throws, not dances, a fight. Bones to set, boards shattered on sight. Shoot or elbow, fingertip flame. Every strike a prayer, every cater name. 6 weeks of fire, no cameras, no fame. Just sweat and bruises, no one played tame. The saw came in, fist like a stone. Said, put him down, break ribs if it's known. It's a crucible, baby, not a velvet crown. You fall, you crawl, but you don't stay down. Elvis hit the map, but he rose with the raw steer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior, forged in Hank's domain. All eyes watched the king that day. Would he crumble or would he stay? But Hank saw it, war in his eyes. Not a quitter, but a fighter who rise. From Hollywood lights to dojo dust, Elvis earned it not on fame but trust. No stunt, no script, just grit and bruise. Black belt truth, not a headline rule. It's a crucible,